could a 4-day week be the answer for many weary workers? Well, some countries seem to be embracing the idea, but would it work here in South Africa? Let's bring in 4-day week South Africa's co-chairperson Mqondisi Gumede to explain to us how this will really work. So, Mqondisi, thank you very much, first of all, for coming to eNCA. I think for a lot of South Africans, that would be welcome. And I assume that it's something that has been brought to the table because it'll help people with fatigue and it'll make people happier because you're spending more time with family?
So that's definitely one of the benefits. I think one of the things that we're seeing in the South African workplace is that workers are not that engaged in the work that they're doing, and also they're not thriving that much in their broader life. So we saw that there was a Gallup survey of the workplaces around the world, and we found that 24% of South Africans were feeling engaged at work, and 29% reported that they were thriving in their overall life. And so one of the things that is the aim of the 4-day week, the pilot that we're discussing and that we are bringing to the attention of South Africans, is that this is one of the ways that we think could really change the game in terms of how South Africans feel and engage with work.
So how would this work? And is business even like listening to this as something that they would want to do?
I think business understands very clearly that a happy and thriving workforce is a necessity for business. I think one of the things to mention is that as soon as business understands that the idea of this 4-day week South Africa pilot is 100% productivity, 80% of the time and 100% of the pay, all of a sudden a lot of the initial fears dissipate. Because we're not talking about a reduction in productivity, output, profitability, those types of things. We're proposing that there are ways to reconfigure work for people to come together and make an agreement, make a pact with one another that will allow them to cut out the unnecessaries, keep the things that produce the output and make the money, and then the spoils go to everybody in the workplace. So that is something that when business understands the premise, this 100, 80, 100, they're very open to it. Then they're all of a sudden very curious, and we start getting a lot of questions around, you know, some of the specificities that they might have.
Some people have been saying, okay, this probably won't work in South Africa because we are a country with a labor law that says that each person must work 40 hours per week, and it's 8 hours a day. Now, that would mean that you're adding 2 more hours to my day at work if it's a Monday to Thursday, for instance.
Sure. So let's take a couple of those. There's a lot in that question, and I'd like to give it its due because it comes up often. The first thing is that we don't see and we don't believe at 4-day week that anything about our South Africanness excludes us from the benefits of a 4-day week. So there are a number of related issues to that. On the issue of legislation, one of the things that we are stressing is that this is something that is an agreement between the employer and employee, which sits on top of our legislative structure, which is an additional layer for which people can agree. And they can go, look, if there is no loss to any of us, if none of us lose anything material, we are happy to then renegotiate our time arrangement. We think is something that happens every day in business. You know, so there are a number of, you know, contracts, freelancers, independence, that type of thing. We're not trying to change the legislative regime necessarily. This is an agreement that both parties can come to, and we think that's an agreement that is helpful to all parties because, as I said earlier on, productivity and the increase of productivity is the main aim of the output. Having said that, there are countries that are looking at legislative changes. The trend internationally is downwards in terms of work time. So a lot of countries are asking the question, should we legislate shorter weeks? Many countries are starting to answer yes, and that is something that will be on the cards, we believe, for every economy. But we think that it's useful at this point for employers and employees to go, there are opportunities on the table to make us thrive more, to be able to produce the same amount, to earn the same amount of money, and for us just to feel and to be more human and to have a better experience at work. And we don't see anything in law that prevents that from taking place. And so I hope that gives you a flavor as to how it is that we're approaching this particular pilot in South Africa.
Yeah, it's all about the person's peace of mind. And when a person's happy at work, they then do more.
Yeah.
Right? But tell me, in terms of the unemployment rate in South Africa,
Sure.
in our country there's so many problems when you think of employment. Actually, we haven't really produced employment in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Do you see this assisting with that issue?
Well, there are two major things to say about this. If productivity stays the same and people reduce their work time, that is a really good situation for employment. What that means practically is that obviously we're not advocating that businesses that operate 7 days a week shut down or that people are not available. What it does mean is that that opens up new spaces in companies everywhere for people to be working in the 20% time that's been reduced. So you'll be very aware, I'm sure I've had this conversation many times over, that there are people who have graduated, can't get work experience, can't get an opportunity, can't get their step in. We see this as something that might open the space for a broad base of people to be able to enter the workplace. And because productivity is not going down, we feel that that is the proper financial basis to do so. I'd like to reference some of the results that we've been seeing from the other pilots around the world. And on another broadcast channel, somebody was discussing the fact that this raises the question that where will that country get the workers to fill in the gaps? And immediately at that point, I thought, well, this is exactly the problem that we are trying to induce in South Africa. And, you know, the 4-day week then is a perfect tool to be able to make the space that so many people who are willing and able and in many places skilled to work, this will open up the space for them to get into the workplace and hopefully drive productivity further.
Yeah, I'm just imagining our courts with the many court cases that we have politically. Imagine if a court is not opening on a Friday and things like that unless it's an urgent basis. But of course this is going to be a pilot project, right, so that we can see how it works.
So critically, we're very pro businesses maintaining their working hours. So just because you know, people work 4 days, it doesn't mean that people are not overlapping, for example, and covering everything. There's no
so it's
loss.
about the individual working 4 days, not necessarily about the business being open for 4 days.
Absolutely. So the reorganization of work says we're scheduling in such a way that our customers receive service like they did before. Everything happens like it did before. The only thing is, what we find is most companies, they go after the big three. One, they reorganize and reform meetings as a major thing. Scheduling as another thing. And, you know, most businesses have got a number of productivity gains, which you find they know how to do. But the willingness of staff just to do another thing has been difficult as a buy-in. When the incentive is, you know, you could thrive and flourish a lot more with a full day off a week, you find the willingness
to wake up and go to work.
There's get up and go there that we see take place. And so that's what we're advocating.
All right. Well, thank you very much. For now, the viewer, you will still see me between Monday and Friday. I will not only be with you for 4 days in a week, but that was a 4-day week SA Co-chaiperson Mqondisi Gumede speaking to us there. Those pilot projects across the world are taking place from next year. Some of the countries around the world have already started. Well,